Hey everybody! So today we're going to put together what we've learned about decimals. So we did a great job yesterday matching up a decimal with a picture. Something that was a little harder for us was putting the decimals on the number line. So let's check out some examples. So I'm going to look at this one, 0.55, and I see right away that has 5 tenths. And I know these big spaces are tenths. Why? Because there's 10. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tenths. So I'll start bringing it here. And then I know the small spaces, the pink ones, are hundredths. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hundredths. So that's those pink spaces. So now I know my number is going to go right there. So it's 5 tenths and 5 hundredths. So same thing with 0.29. I would count 1, 2 tenths, 2, and 9 hundredths. So I start at my 2 tenths and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And I'll bring it up here. And I'll line it up. There we go. Now, if I wanted, I could count 29 hundredths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It would just take a long time. But this is the same as 29 hundredths. However, I think it's easier to do the tenths and then do the hundredths. So let's look at this one. Now this is to the right of the decimal place. Is that a tenth or a hundredth? Well, in number 1, you all figured out that that's a tenth. So 9 tenths, whoops, wrong thing. If I were to pick up 9 tenths and compare it here, let me make sure it's all the same size. What does 9 tenths look like? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 tenths is up here because there's 10 equal pieces. So I saw that some of you were thinking this was a hundredth. But if I had 9 hundredths, so 9 pink pieces, 9 hundredths, I would have to say 0.09 because this is where the hundredths go. 0.9 is 9 tenths. So remember what we learned. This spot to the right of the decimal point is tenths. This spot is hundredths. We also reviewed how to match a decimal with a picture. And we know that tenths are 10 equal pieces. Hundredths are 100 equal pieces. Thousandths are 1,000 equal pieces. So let's look here. This is 1 whole. There's no decimal point, so it's 1 whole. It's a whole square. This is 4 tenths. So I look and I see 1, 2, 3, 4 tenths. Goes over here. This is 2 tenths and 4 hundredths, or 24 hundredths. So it would go here. And then we have 0.2. And some of you told me I messed up. Yes, I did. This is not actually 0.2. This is 3 hundredths. This is 12 hundredths. Or we could say it's 1 tenth and 2 hundredths. And then this is 0.8. Now I think some of you got confused because you were looking at this and you said, well, Miss Izzy, those are hundredths. That's 80 hundredths. But if we were to think about it as tenths, guess what we would see? It's the same thing. 8 tenths is equal to 80 hundredths. those are the same amount of space. We just cut it up differently. So we learned about tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. And on Monday, we learned how to write those. So here we have 1,000. So that's 1,000. We have 0 hundredths. We have 1 10, so we just write 10. We have 2 ones, right? 2, and 3 tenths. So remember, tenths have to be after a decimal place. So it has to be 0.3 because it's that first spot to the right of the decimal place. So voy a repetirlo en español. Las decenas, los tenths, son el primer lugar a la derecha del decimal. Las centenas o hundredths son la segunda lugar a la derecha del decimal. So the hundredths are the second place to the right of the decimal. So I need 1, 2 places. Now thousandths, how many places is that? Boop, boop, boop. 3. So thousandths, I need 1, 2, 3 places to the right of the decimal. So that's thousandths. So today you're going to practice all of that yourself. All right. So let's say I want to show 35 hundredths. So first I see 3 tenths. And if you want, I'm going to include a slide like this so you could even practice writing. How are you going to write 35 hundredths on your slide? Because that might be helpful. This is 3, that's 5, and I don't need anything there. So I see 3 tenths and 3 hundredths. So I'm going to grab a tenth. I'm going to go 1 tenth, 2 tenths, 3 tenths. Then I need 5 of these guys. So it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 because there are 5 hundredths. All right, so I have 35 hundredths. Now, how do I write that as a fraction? I write 35 out of 100. Or as an expanded decimal, I would write, just like we learned up here, that it's 3 tenths and that would be 5 hundredths. So I'd write 0.3, 3 tenths plus 0.05. 5 hundredths. And a neat trick that somebody actually told me about in our class the other day is if you think about it as an addition problem, and let's say we were adding and we lined up the decimal point, 0.3 plus 0.05, let me get everything lined up nicely, would equal 0.35. So it's kind of like you're adding up your numbers. So you can think about how you would make 0.35 by adding first tenths and then hundredths, if that works for you. You might also see a problem with some thousandths. So it's the same number, 35 hundredths, but now I'm looking at a grid of 1,000. So I'm going to make my number just like I did before. And if you want, you can just copy and paste it from the previous slide. And then I'm going to go boop, boop, boop. And I have to think about, okay, how many thousandths is this? So I know that if there's 1,000, it's going to be 100, 200, 300. And then these have 10 in each block. So it's 310, 320, 330. Oops, I forgot to. 340, 350. So that's equal to 350 thousandths. And this one, the decimal, oops, I wrote the wrong name there. This one, the decimal notation is the same. It's not different. So this one is always the same for the same number. But the fraction is different because I'm looking at a different picture of a fraction. So voy a repetirlo una vez en español. Tú estás haciendo el número que dice aquí usando tenths y hundredths, escribiendo la fracción que aquí ves y escribiendo el decimal de forma expandida. Entonces, cada valor posicional, cada lugar separado. Y aquí estás haciendo lo mismo, pero aquí en esta foto demuestra thousandths. Entonces hay que escribir cuál fracción es de 1000. Y podemos imaginar, aquí este 10 vale 100 de los 1000, ¿verdad? Porque no es un décimo. Bueno, sigue siendo un décimo, pero es igual a 100 de los 1000, porque hay 10 centenas en 1000. Entonces, todo es poderes de 10. Todo está expandiendo por 10. So remember, it's powers of 10. It's always expanding by 10. So this is 1/10. It's the same as 10 hundredths. It's the same as 100 thousandths. So that's something you can always keep in mind. 1/10 is the same as 10 hundredths. Is the same as 100 out of 1,000. Those are all the same thing. It's just different ways to see it. So go ahead, try it out for homework. We'll see how it goes. I think you guys are going to do great because you did such a good job on this part and this part that I can tell you really understand it. Let's go.